welcome to the Mold Pod. This episode of 312, the HRP Podcast, is a dive into mold and the mold-related work we do here. That's this episode's Work Hard section. After that, we'll be going from fungi to fun guys. When I sit down with HRP Regional Manager Shaun Malin for our Play Hard segment, recorded at HRP's Clays for Cancer, an annual charity clay shoot that raises funds for breast cancer research. But first, let's get moldy. When I first spoke about a mold pod possibility with our industrial hygiene experts on the environmental health and safety side of the business, I had in mind giant dark green blooms of mold, black speckles, and thick dark green carpets of mold. But the reality is that mold is a far more subtle concern. It doesn't typically begin with spotting a patch of the stuff, but usually with a stink. That moldy mildew smell is the telltale sign, usually followed by allergy-like symptoms. Typically, mold work is associated with an indoor air quality concern. For HRP's clients, we're looking at industry and commercial spaces. And for mold problems, we've ruled out manufacturing and process concerns. What we're mainly trying to identify is if microbial contamination is present, which would usually mean that something abnormal is occurring inside a building that we're not seeing outside. We test for mold by tape lift sampling, the most common method, and air sampling. Inside, we're looking for our temperature ranges, relative humidity, carbon dioxide, appropriate number of air exchanges happening inside the building. Those are our assessment tools. In the second phase of a mold investigation, we're looking for why the mold problem is happening, which is a moisture issue. We measure if things are wet or dry and compare moisture presence. On the outside of a structure, we're checking the landscaping, gutters, looking for where moisture gets in. Though mold is principally a health concern, our business is finding if and where it's present. The industry norm for establishing healthy mold levels is the indoor problem with mold worse than what's happening outside? Mold spores are naturally occurring. We're trying to find if the naturally occurring levels are elevated due to some source of contamination. There are formal standards from an exposure perspective on what is and is not a dangerous level of mold. Sources can be functionally invisible in the ceiling, in the walls, and the spores are intruding. In South Carolina, lack of proper ventilation is the biggest problem we see causing mold. One person working on the mold problem in South Carolina is Kirby Mitchell. Kirby is an attorney and the legal director of the Upstate Medical Legal Partnership, a nonprofit that provides free legal assistance to low-income residents of South Carolina. We sat down with him and HRP's president and COO, Tad Gutches, for a conversation on the work they're doing around mold. Kirby, thank you so much for joining us today on this episode of the 312 Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
We're also joined by Tad Gutches, COO and President of HRP.
Always a pleasure, Tom. Looking forward to this one today.
Absolutely. Kirby, why don't you give us a brief introduction of who you are for those not familiar?
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm Kirby Mitchell. I'm the legal director of the Upstate Medical Legal Partnership. So that's an innovative partnership between Prisma Health, the primary healthcare provider here in upstate South Carolina, Furman University, and South Carolina Legal Services, commonly known as Legal Aid. So basically, we are an embedded legal aid office inside a safety net hospital. Lots of patients that roll into the hospital, they've got conditions that are caused by or exacerbated by environmental issues, the housing they're in, or various issues like that. And so HRP Associates has been great kind of helping us address some of those cases.
So this is classified as a medical legal partnership. Can you tell us more what that means?
Yeah, so that is a creation from the early 90s in Boston. Dr. Barry Zuckerman was a frustrated pediatrician. He was seeing kids with asthma, cystic fibrosis, conditions like that, where they would be fine under his care within the four walls of the hospital. But then when he'd send them home to their moldy apartment, same issues. And so the doctor kind of realized he was not the solution to that particular medical problem. He was a pulmonologist, a pediatrician, an expert at this, but he had, I think, the humility and the wisdom to see that this type of medical problem might need another team member, another part of the solution. So he connected with legal aid lawyers. That developed really well in Boston. It slowly spread across the country. There's now about 300 of these MLPs, medical legal partnerships, in some form or fashion. Here in South Carolina, we were the 41st state to get one. And so, we here in the upstate started ours in late 2016. We took a little time. Working out that type of partnership is not easy. We kind of joke that a doctor, a lawyer, and a PhD go into a bar. That's an MLP. But yeah, we took about 3 years to do our first 500 cases, and then that really has grown exponentially. We've done about 3,000, and the demand is really increasing.
And Ted, can you tell us a little bit about the technical expertise that HRP provides, what its role has been with this medical legal partnership?
Yeah, sure. What Mr. Mitchell Kirby would do was he would often talk about the background and the science. Hey, I have this issue. What typically can you do that will identify a problem? And so a lot of times what we would do is do analytical testing. We would collect examples. We would do a background survey of conditions, because conditions are very important whenever you're doing health surveys and industrial surveys. So the environment they're in, the temperature, the relative humidity, the situations that they're in. And at times you always want to do some sampling, and you want to do a proper sampling protocol where you have a good average to take from both outside and inside people's living quarters. And you would sample for a variety of mold species, a lot of long names with Greek endings on them, but some of those are natural occurring molds that we find in cheeses and foods and things like this, and then some of them are good molds and bad molds, and you really want to discern where they are and how they affect a situation of somebody's environments, not only once as a data set, but you want to come back and see if it changed. So this week, this day, this night, the different change in the seasons when you have someone's environment. So we could provide that data to someone like Kirby's group for them to look at and analyze.
And Kirby, can you tell us a little bit more about why a partnership like this is so valuable?
Low-income folks that are eligible for legal aid, they often are also eligible for assistance with their medical care. They qualify for Medicaid or Medicare, or we help a lot of vulnerable veterans or folks that really are getting helped by totally separate professionals, doctors and lawyers, with what had always been no communication, no coordination. And so the medical legal partnership is just a savvy way to take these public resources and coordinate and work together. Like think about if I help one family in a moldy apartment, usually these apartment units, it's multiple families that are dealing with the same issue. If the roof is leaking, it's not just one unit. So those are all people that are being driven to the emergency room, that are missing school, missing work. So it's kind of I think in academia now, this is widely accepted, the social determinants of health or social drivers of health is what you hear folks label that. But it's just I would say a common sense recognition that, maybe you don't pump a child full of powerful steroids and medications without at least first looking at, hey, what if we addressed the mold or the irritant or the bed bugs or whatever the environmental issue is first, that can get upstream, that can help so much in the long run. And also, like I mentioned, it has that wider ripple effect. Usually we're not just talking about one unit.
What about, again, from like a really general perspective, associated health risks?
Yeah, that has been something that professionals here at HRP have really educated me somewhat about. Here in upstate South Carolina, mold is really common in so many buildings. We have a lot of humidity here, like you'd expect. We have some housing stock that's quite dated. So, yeah, I think the effect that mold has, it really varies a lot between the type of patient or client. But what we really focus on, which I think you can appreciate, it's young kids, up to age 3 or 5 or so that have a condition like asthma or cystic fibrosis or something that, generally the pediatricians tell me those are the vulnerable years. That's where you can have irreparable harm or scarring or a reduction in the ceiling of development of lungs and kind of vital organs. So we really focus there. As you can imagine, some folks, they have mold in their apartment, but I've had clients that they also smoke or they have multiple pets. And, that can be a challenge then to try to persuade a jury or a landlord that the cause of the health problem is strictly the mold. But yeah, that's just something we deal with cases we accept and kind of choosing which ones to focus on. HRP has been helpful to me in the cases where we really are confident that it is an environmental issue within the apartment, particularly mold generally, and that's something that the landlord can be required to address, and then we see a health improvement.
I was going to say, too, one of the things when you're talking about mold is most people do think respiratory, pulmonary as well as that, but when you have a situation like that, it could be nausea. People are tired, the lack of sleep, which breeds it. But the big thing is the synergistic effect when you're combining it with other parts of their environment. And that's the problem. And any one of us could have the mold situation. Kirby had mentioned about smoking, mold with smoking, and just any kind of external factors, where they live, the pollution, the industry that's getting involved with this. They're trying to beat back that synergistic effect.
So what happens when we discover a problem? What's the life cycle of that?
Let me run through a kind of maybe a typical medical legal partnership case that involves mold. Now, we handle all kinds of cases, all kinds of social issues that affect people. Some are family court cases, probate court. Not everything's tenant landlord, but I do get a pretty steady diet of pediatricians or pulmonologists saying to us, hey, we think you should take a look at this, lawyer, because we think maybe there's issues. It sounds like something in the apartment that could be the real cause. So first thing I do is go to the apartment. I've learned enough to know that laying eyes on it early is helpful. And just with what some of the good folks at HRP have educated me, I look for a water source. I look for moisture. I look for what may be the cause. Sometimes it's as simple as a air conditioner unit that was never properly leveled. And so water builds up. That's pretty common, actually, to my surprise. So sometimes I've been educated enough to kind of start to have theories about some of the causes. Sometimes I have no clue. And we escalate to the level of HRP professional getting in there, taking a look, maybe doing a test. It varies so widely, Tom, what you see. Some units are relatively new, and yet, the construction today is so tight that there's almost no ventilation. That's you might think it's only the older units that have the problem. It really varies. Sometimes it's just from a toilet overflow or a chronic situation that a plumber made a mistake. But basically, we start there. It's a doctor who has identified a health problem, and we're investigating if we can link it to an environmental cause. And then confronting the landlord with that. Sometimes that can be a letter, that can be a pleasant conversation, that can be a not so pleasant conversation, that can be mediation, that can be litigation. So that's where the attorney kind of determines the resolution of that case. But that's kind of the typical life cycle.
And going back to the beginning of that life cycle, would you say that maybe a majority of the issues that are seen here that lead to mold are easily preventable things, and that prevention could be a huge issue with this? Or are these kind of inevitabilities of the ecosystem in which the Southeast is located?
Man, it varies so widely. I mean, I think in particular, as we see, what's referred to as climate change or, extreme weather, I don't know that you can prevent some of this. Water intrusion seems to be the driver of a lot of it. And then just the lower income clients that legal aid assists, they're often kind of dealing with the brunt of that, the less wonderful properties and just not having the resources to address it when a problem does arise.
I would think one of the things is mold or spores are everywhere. They're in this room we're at, but they're at a controllable level. That's why we have air filtration, things like this. But there are some low-hanging fruit that are out there. And if you're looking at building construction, if you're looking at residential housing, a lot of times you can look at folks having a water leak, replacing the carpet. But unless you do something with the subflooring, putting a brand new carpet over a problem will not stop that mold growth because Kirby had mentioned looking for a water source. Mold needs to have sunlight and a water source, and it will keep on going. The idea is to clean or dry that out. So the things such as slow leaks or that was leaking through the roof. So it could be a patched roof by someone who is inferior, or construction that's been done by something that's inferior, or is taking the low route or the most cost-effective route. What you will see a lot of times if there is a leak, you don't necessarily cut the leak out as much as you replace the whole wall or cut half a wall out of sheetrock. So you're looking at oftentimes poor construction. So visible molds, visible stains, water through light fixtures, leaking toilets, the air conditioners Kirby's talked about. If there's any water supply or when it's anywhere where standing water, a lot of times we look at mosquitoes, that same water would be a breeding case for mold. But it's the construction that's done. So you want maybe a history of what has been done, what has been retrofitted, what the materials were used, and even finding out what was removed and where did it go. Those are a lot of the things that you do to try to find, which ends up breeding the mold. And unless done properly, you're going to have a problem.
So Kirby, tell me more about the landlord experience, because I got to imagine there's a variety of stuff there, from like the worst of the worst to the surprisingly helpful.
Yeah, Tom, you're right. There's such a diversity of landlords. We have a lot of units here in the upstate that are managed by out-of-state companies and huge owners or managers of rental properties. And then, that ranges all the way to a guy with one trailer in his backyard that he, spliced the electricity himself and kind of created a rental unit. So you've got a massive range. You've got sometimes family members renting to other family members with no written lease. It just varies so widely. So, yeah, that has really dictated the experience. A huge difference for me is when the property is some form of public housing. You may have heard the term Section 8 housing, or there's veterans housing or different subsidized housing projects and units here all across the upstate. It's kind of a weird patchwork, and we even experienced lawyers, we struggle with knowing sometimes exactly what federal program or state program that housing authority or subsidy comes from. But that really helps determine how the litigation or the addressing of the problem proceeds. Because sometimes you find a very willing and responsive landlord, whether that be public or private. I've been kind of impressed with how some landlords, had no idea until we raised the issue with them, and they went above and beyond. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of landlords who just tried the cheapest remediation. One of the biggest complaints isn't the mold itself; it's the sort of pretend attempt to address it, or just sort of just paint over it, or just buy a can of Kills. Or there's this, I think, still lack of understanding of how damaging that can be. Again, particularly in the context of let's say you have a 3-year-old child who you think is unable to breathe in the middle of the night. That's the origin of a lot of these cases for me, like frantic trips to the emergency room where people are staying in the hospital for a couple of days. So, I think not every case is that extreme, of course, but I'm kind of haunted by knowing sometimes that if we don't address this when the child is 1, 2, 3 years old, it's really going to actually have a lifelong effect. And so those cases really kind of move to the front of our priority list.
We're recording this not too long on the heels of Hurricane Helene coming through the Carolinas and eastern Tennessee. Can you tell us what you think the impacts of the hurricane will be?
Yeah, it's a great question. My guess is we will see in the next few months an uptick, some increase in of the medical legal partnership cases referred to me by doctors and nurse practitioners, some uptick in these issues with mold, because we just in the upstate had hundreds and hundreds of trees hit roofs and houses, and then think about this. I mean, power was out for a lot of people for a week, even longer. So no air conditioning, no fans, no, all the ventilator systems and things took quite a break, and we've had the typical seasonal humidity here. So that would be my guess. Of course, I'd love to hear what the environmental engineers and folks at HRP would guess, just based on what they see. That would be my prediction.
Yeah, one thing you're going to start to see is building materials. And you're going to see building materials that are either cut out because water damage has occurred from said trees or damage to buildings and appurtenances and stuff like that. You're going to see a lot of that. And we've done a lot of hurricane response in the past in Florida, Texas, areas of that nature. And to going into these houses now that are secure, safe, you have power. Kirby mentioned a big one there, when the air conditioning will control the relative humidity. When the relative humidity is too high, you will have mold growth just naturally without a lot of moisture. It's the moisture in the air. But there is a way you can go in with a simple moisture meter and take readings on sheetrock and decide whether it still has too much moisture or not. And that tells you where your remediation is. And that's why I always mention, you never cut to the line of remediation of where the moisture is. You always go above and beyond to ensure something is dry. Then you can patch and do your repairs. There's also relative humidity meters and other things that are very cheap that you could take and walk through a building and say, geez, the east side is very bad. We've adequately remediated the west side, and you can document things of that nature. So you're going to see a lot of roofs get replaced, a lot of sheetrock, windows. You'll see a lot of that debris on the side of the road because people are addressing that form of the situation. And unfortunately, you will see it in some of the areas of environmental justice because, people were out power anywhere from 3 to 10, 12 days. That's enough time to have a problem. Mold can be slow growing or it can be fast growing. You don't know when it's going to come out, but a lot of times if you do not have the utilities working properly in your area, it's going to be an issue at some point at everyone's building.
When would we recommend that someone out there who may be listening to this, may be worried about how they've been impacted by hurricane damage or flood damage, what should they be on the lookout for in terms of when they think they might want to get in touch with you?
Well, for me, Tom, it's all driven by the medical condition. So certainly there's a lot of attorneys available to folks if they think they've got an issue with their landlord. The medical legal partnership approach is laser focused on health problems identified by doctors and lawyers. So if you're doctors and nurse practitioners and others at the hospital. So if your treating physician thinks you or your kids are having breathing issues related to your housing environment, that can become what we call an MLP case, for at least for investigation and addressing that. Like Tad mentioned, it goes beyond just mold and difficulty breathing. That can have nausea and other issues, long-term impact. And pulmonologists and other medical professionals have really helped me understand what type of filtration, for example, or air filters or, weather stripping or, they're pretty good. That the asthma professionals, that's not a condition where there's a cure exactly. That's a condition where you learn to deal with it and minimize the impacts of your environment and sort of your microclimate. And so I've learned a lot from the doctors and from the folks at HRP that really are where you start before any sort of legal attempt to address it.
And coming around, I think, to close up here on just a point of interest for me, have you ever testified in court?
I have testified in court, but usually I'm the one asking the questions of an expert or a witness. I'm glad that I got the opportunity. A lot of lawyers, have never, for example, served on a jury or been a witness in a case. And so it's kind of a humbling and useful experience to kind of see it from that perspective.
Is there anything like what we see on TV?
Occasionally, there's so much law on TV now, but I think, I have a lot of Furman students who go to court and observe with me kind of watch what we do at the MLP, and they often come away thinking, that wasn't as fancy as I expected. I think, there's a huge range in the formality and grandeur of, for example, a federal courthouse, and then where most landlord-tenant cases are heard, what we call magistrate courts or summary courts in South Carolina. Those can be in trailers and kind of modest facilities themselves, probably with mold themselves, now that I think about it. But yeah, it's, legal aid and the medical legal partnership tend to be more of a people's court type legal system, but that's where the real problems are, and that's what people really need. And, HRP has been great to help with individual cases that really matter.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. And I guess just to take us out here, I would like to know a little bit more about the two of you, because you guys go way back, as I understand it.
It's been a while. It predates South Carolina. I would say we got to know each other late 80s, early 90s, I would think.
Yeah, a good high school friend of mine worked at HRP and was a roommate of Tad way back in the day. So we became friends back when you would get together to go to a concert or drink a beer, perhaps. And Tad and I have known each other for ages and just been friends and golf buddies. And so this partnership has been really kind of special for us. I speak for both of us, but it's been kind of cool to take what we do for a living and kind of see, hey, we can actually benefit one another and really benefit a lot of other people. So it's been great.
Yeah, and it's one of those things because we have played a lot of golf together, but it's often been said a lot of business is done on the golf, but you just kind of talk when you're on the golf cart, and it was kind of neat seeing this partnership that Kirby had, and for me it was a breath of fresh air because it was like, finally, we got more than one institution involved to fight a problem, because a lot of times you do everything you can and then it usually ends there, or it's good for 5 or 6 years and then the problem starts back up again. And, through a couple rounds, we talked about this, and hey, that's pretty neat. And you saw the success of it. And, Kirby talked today, geez, you said thousands of cases since the time you started to do that, which is phenomenal, because it's great to see that. It's great to see that does benefit the environment.
And I would say stay tuned, because, we started here in the upstate, but now there's a medical legal partnership that has started in Charleston. There's one in Beaufort. They just announced one in Spartanburg. And so I'm looking to share what we've learned with HRP, and maybe HRP can serve the state in this role. We're going to look for a little seed money or a grant to kind of test that. But certainly, this is not a problem just unique to the upstate. There's cases exactly like this all through South Carolina, and I think the medical legal partnership is really expanding in a really healthy way. So I'm hopeful that we'll be able to report to you even more success with this approach going forward.
Awesome. Well, we'll check in again soon.
I was going to say I'm glad to see that expansion, because in 30 years since I've been in South Carolina, the population's gone from 3.1 million to 5.3 million. So those numbers tell that the need is there. So I'm glad that the support service followed that need. Oftentimes it goes the other way, but I'm glad it's kind of going hand in hand with that.
Fantastic. Oh, well, Kirby, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks as well.
Thanks, Tom.
Everybody, welcome to the Play Hard section of the 312 podcast. I'm joined here by Shaun Malin.
Good afternoon.
We've just had a successful day at Clays for Cancer, the 4th annual of this shoot, where we help raise money for breast cancer research funded through the American Cancer Society. But also, this is our mold podcast where we talked to Kirby Mitchell about the great work he's doing, helping people in the Southeast get connected with the right legal resources and medical resources they need, and the work that we've done with them.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So have we done a lot of that mold work in the Southeast, Shaun?
We have, obviously, in the Southeast, we have a kind of a climate that lends itself to those types of issues as opposed to other areas of the country. Obviously, this time of year, third, fourth quarter, you have hurricane season. And so, our skill sets in the Southeast lend to those types of services that we help people out with.
Yeah, and of course, it's been exacerbated by the recent hurricane. Of course.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that those types of issues are going to surface at this point in time. We're, approximately 4 weeks or so post-hurricane. You have areas that have not been able to get stabilized, for lack of a better term. And so you probably have a variety of different areas or pockets of structures that haven't had power, buildings that have been deserted, and justly so. And so it's at this point, following a natural disaster like that, where we start receiving requests and calls for services like that during the rebuilding efforts, mitigation efforts.
Yeah, right here in Greenville, you were kind of like on the line between stuff that was untouched and stuff that was devastated, right?
Yeah. Greenville, South Carolina, I think, based on talking to our clientele, we were right there in the track. And I think that a lot of people that don't understand Southeast geography understand how close we were to Asheville. I think a lot of the national media focus a lot on Asheville, North Carolina, and justly so. Tremendous amount of devastation up there. But that storm came pretty much through Greenville to get to Asheville.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of folks actually that weren't here today at Clays for Cancer who were up there and around the general tri-state area dealing with and helping out with mitigation efforts, trying to get people back on their feet and businesses back on their feet. So our thoughts are with them.
Yeah, Shaun, do you want to give any shout-outs to folks in the office? Because I know there were quite a few people who really went above and beyond to help out during the hurricane and immediately afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the whole office, the whole region, in and of itself, everybody had their own individual story. We had staff members who had family up in harm's way. We had friends, we had clients. There was clients that we just finally have spoken to verbally for the first time in several weeks that we were concerned about. So it's been a weird experience here for the last month. Obviously, we've done a lot of the things that a lot of the other businesses have done, food drives, products, but we've had folks actually, the chainsaw brigade, right? We have folks that have, in the Greenville area, in the upstate of South Carolina area, spent their days while we had no power, no internet, right? Chipping in within our own community, trying to dig people out. A lot of tree loss. I don't know how much of that came through. Asheville had a significant amount of flooding, a lot of dam breaks, a lot of destruction. The upstate of South Carolina had a tremendous amount of tree fall, which then created power outages, utility outages, and all the things that come with that. We had some individuals pack up supplies and drive north to Asheville to help out communities where bridges were washed out. There were stories of zip lines across creeks that were flooding, and food and rivers, I should say, not just creeks, but some serious efforts. Proud that HRP from a company standpoint, we're that family first, right? That's so cliche,
Yeah.
and that a lot of people say. HRP is tremendous when it comes to money where your mouth is, so to speak, and we were able to provide people with the flexibility to, number one, take care of your family, take care of your property, and dive in there to the community. And when everything's back on and the power's back on, go do what you got to do. That's kind of the way we like to lead. We trust folks to do what they got to do. And if that means they got to, drive into the face of danger to help out their network and their community and their greater family, then that's what we're going to do.
Yeah. How far out are we now from the hurricane? As of
about-
today, we're filming.
So I'm going to say it was like September 27th. I don't. So today's the 20. I think we're about a month out,
Yeah.
give or take a couple days.
And is the office back up to 100%?
Yeah. So we were down for about 5 calendar days. The storm hit on a Friday morning, hard in Greenville. We were able to, the funny thing is, we have all sorts of, most companies have contingency plans, procedures for dealing with these types of things. But when you have no internet and no power, we were able to, the thing that definitely worked for everybody, no matter where they were geographically, and let's say the half an hour to 60 minutes away from downtown Greenville, where the office is, everybody had text. So, at that point in time, plans are great.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you have to find, you have to pivot. You have to be, okay, look, this is how this is going to go. And we started a text chain with like 20 people on it. And so that was the surefire way that we could communicate with everybody. We talked about what people needed, who had power, who needed things. Did you need gas? Do you need bar oil? Is somebody, the trees are blocking their neighborhood? Like just all these different types of things that that only when you're in that situation, that kind of come to arise.
Yeah. So we are at Clays for Cancer today, 4th annual. It's been a while since we had a beer check on the Play Hard section. What do you got? Tumbler?
What do I have?
Yeah.
So Tom Darby, environmental practice leader, went to the Costco here in Greenville, and he found these like Sierra Nevada multi-packs. And for those of you that don't know, everybody I think thinks of Sierra Nevada as a California beer, but they have a major operation in Asheville, which is what we're talking about. They have a phenomenal brewery and restaurant in Asheville. And that brings to mind, I wonder how they fared. I haven't heard anything about it.
Yeah.
But I'm drinking a tumbler brown ale from Sierra Nevada. And actually, if you look at the can, it says Chico, California, Mills River, North Carolina, which is minutes south of downtown Asheville. And this is a brown ale, and I've never had this before because I think Sierra Nevada, from a distribution standpoint, you always see the pale ale.
Yes.
No matter where you go, you can count on that. But they have a whole bunch of different things, Tom, that next time you're down, you should really go up there. I can't believe you haven't been up there. And perhaps I could chaperone you.
Yeah.
Should really take you up there.
Designated driver.
I know at this point in time, Sierra Nevada is so successful that it's probably, it's pretty mainstream at this point in time. But they still have small brewery vibes up there.
Yeah, it doesn't mean you can't make good beer, right?
Yeah. And I've been to the Asheville location. They have even more eclectic stuff in there. They have one time I bought this, you see you know more about this than me, the large format bottles that are I don't know, 36 ounces or something. They had a cherry porter or something like that.
Yeah.
Cherry chocolate porter.
Okay, yep.
And my wife was with me, and she's like, "Are you gonna?" It was delicious. It was phenomenal.
Yeah.
It was phenomenal. So that's what I'm drinking. Sorry, I
Okay.
took 15 minutes away of your life.
No worries. I got the Nooner from Sierra Nevada. Really nice little Pilsner. Very drinkable.
Okay, so that's like a fishing beer kind of thing.
So,
A
it's
Nooner.
sitting on the lake.
Yeah.
Deck chairs, beach beer.
So what do you think tumbler means? Why is it called tumbler if it's a brown ale?
Brown ale?
Tumbler is
Dude, I
like
don't know,
a
man.
like a liquor, like a
Honestly,
highball.
the way people name their beers, it's worse than racehorses. At least it's one word that makes sense.
I love I always you could write these little blurbs for beers. Like, this is so you, Tom Simmons.
Yeah.
Tumbler is our take on the classic brown ale, full of roasted malt flavor, but delicate on the palate and perfect for crisp
I love
fall
it when it's
days.
delicate on the
Like,
palate.
that's so you.
Shaun, did you know that in a perfect world, every afternoon would start with a tall glass of Pilsner, a group of friends?
I agree.
And a vow to go out and own the day.
I mean,
We're doing our part with Nooner. Our take on the classic German-style brilliant golden in color with a hop-forward flavor and a crisp finish. Let Nooner kick off your adventures.
Nooner.
Yeah.
Now I'm getting all these other visions. But, you know what's odd is every morning I say that exact same phrase in the mirror.
Yeah, dude. It's great motivation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's my daily mantra
over there.
I'm just doing my Sierra Nevada Nooner. It gets me going.
I'm reciting my Sierra Nevada mantra.
I think that this was a banner year. I think we've been very lucky that
It's double, right? Double the attendance?
double the attendance. And Shannon Riley, who's not here, she's a board member of the American Cancer Society here in the upstate of South Carolina. We feel very lucky that, you know, you think, for those of you out there in the space that are in philanthropy, like in it, like annually, you know, an election year, post-hurricane in this region.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of reasons, rightful reasons, for people not to be generous with their time, their money, their resources. Like, this is traditionally, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here. I think that anybody that's involved in philanthropy would say that this is generally a crap year for that. And so the fact that 4 weeks after an extreme once-in-a-lifetime weather event here in our region, in addition to all of the other chaos things here, the fact that this event grew, we haven't done the final tallies, but I'm pretty sure that the amount of money that we've raised for breast cancer awareness and ACS has grown. So that's just a testament to the network that we've tapped into, the quality of the people here, the quality of the companies, and that whole work hard, play hard, give back mentality that is so important to us here at HRP and obviously other companies here in the upstate of South Carolina.
What are some of your highlights from the day? Like, what were some moments from today that really stood out to you?
For me personally?
Yeah.
Well, I had my wife here with me today, so that was awesome. She usually shoots, but we had some teams fell apart for obvious reasons. Again, not to keep going back to the hurricane, but it's contemporary, right? We had several folks that couldn't make it because they were dealing with response efforts and helping people. So she was able to ride in the cart with me today, which is something that hasn't happened before. I think that one of the highlights, and sorry that people are packing up. I guess it's time to go.
The song's gonna start. The closing song's gonna come on.
Like you don't have to go home, but you can't stay here, Tom.
Did you see that Saturday Night Live skit that recently came out with the one with Jane Wickline on Weekend Update doing her little piano song about going to a party that's over and refusing to admit it?
Was that last Friday?
It's been blowing up my TikTok for.
Oh man, I love it.
Yeah.
Can I just say that I am 47 years old. And so I remember when I got into. Can we pivot to Saturday Night Live? Can we talk about that a little bit? So when I became of Saturday Night Live age, and let's just frame it like that, right? When your parents were like, I don't care if he watches this or not. I grew up in Saturday Night Live with the David Spade, Chris Farley, to a lesser extent, Will Ferrell, Adam Sandler.
You're such a Will Ferrell guy too.
Yeah, right? Yeah. All those guys. And I remember distinctly that my mom and dad coming into the room who grew up with Chevy Chase and
Dan Aykroyd, Jim Belushi.
And like, this is garbage.
Yeah.
These guys suck.
It's always how
right?
it goes, yeah.
And I fairly recently, we've gone through a lull in Saturday Night Live, not with this current crew over the last three years, but I feel like it's been a little topsy-turvy here over the last decade, right? Is that fair? Do you acknowledge that?
Yeah.
And so I feel like the current crew, what I'm getting at here, folks, I'm getting to the point. I feel like the last 2 to 3 years, including current year Saturday Night Live, that cast is magical. And I feel like we are witnessing a rebirth And again, the folks that are tuning into Saturday Night Live currently will 10 to 15 years from now will be like, oh man, Colin and Che and Bowen, like those guys were legendary, right? Like I'm extremely confident that we're seeing something special on that front. What was your question?
No, I'm just like
Clays for Cancer. Yeah.
highlights from the day.
Highlights from the day. Thank you, Tom.
What stood out for you?
What was cool about today was that we had a tremendous amount of, hey guys, can you slam those louder? Because we can still hear ourselves. Trey, can you make that louder when you do that? Okay. All right. Do better.
I'm just glad that means that we don't have to clean up.
Right?
You just timed it perfectly.
I'll slide you a 20 for making me not do this. I think that there was a tremendous amount of people who had maybe individually been a part of teams in previous years, but this year they showed up with their own teams.
Yeah.
And so I feel like specifically the last 2 years, this year and last year, we really saw unscientific, I feel like 50% growth with people who had never been before. And I feel like that's really exciting because I feel like we're starting to crescendo. I feel like the first couple of years, organic growth, word of mouth, it doesn't bother me.
It doesn't bother me either.
You're smiling at me.
I know, I'm enjoying it. I think it's awesome. I love it. Audio texture.
I mean, you're the audio guy, so this is going to suck for you.
Yeah,
right?
It'll suck if it doesn't come through, and then we're just like reacting to nothing.
Oh, well, if that's the case, there's a tremendous amount of banging.
Yes.
And
so much banging going on over here.
Yeah. Like we're literally at the bar.
Yeah.
That's closing down at 2, and we're trying to do a podcast.
Have a nice drink here with my friend.
Right? A
tumbler. I never get to see because he's in
know.
South Carolina. And I'm in Farmington. Got to kick us out.
So, I mean, I just think that the organic growth in every year, there's people who I don't necessarily have a personal relationship with within the HRP network that come up and like, this was awesome, and next year I'm going to do this, or I'm going to bring this, or I'm going to, hey, a gentleman today came up to me and was like, hey, I know I'm good friends with this distillery in this county down the road, and, if they knew about this, they would participate and they would help out. And that, in a nutshell, is how this thing is going to crescendo into something that it's already awesome. It's just icing on the cake. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's every year. It's super stressful. HRP had a tremendous amount of help this year, which really was fantastic. And I think that I actually had my first conversation with an attendee who has been here from the beginning. It was an industrial manufacturer, a client of ours that has been here since the very first event. And it's just interesting to start having conversations of, does it get too big?
I've been actually wondering that.
You know what I mean?
Every year.
Like, we love the feel.
Yeah.
And the minute we get too big, do we lose what we love about it?
Yeah.
Right? And I think that in and of itself is a testament to success in any walk of life.
I get myself so gassed up on my promo stuff that I'm like, but what if I get too many people to show up? Then I'm making it a problem.
Right? I mean, like the fact that I'm even like, you know what? That's a good thought process.
Yeah.
Like, but it's like, come on, man. Like, if I hope 4 years ago we could only hope that we were having that conversation.
Yeah.
Right? So, good problems to have.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely.
All right. Well,
what do you think about? I'm interrupting you. What did you? I mean, listen. You have a vantage point. Like, I'm in it and I'm living it. Yeah. And you have a unique vantage point of coming in. You kind of come in a couple days before the event. You see some last minute preparation, but I'll flip the tables on you. Like, what have you observed over the last 4 years, and what has changed, and for the better or for the worse?
I'll say that I have, in the 4 years, I think I've only been for the 3. I don't think I missed the first one, I think.
Okay.
I think I've been for the 3 of them. I would say that I've never once seen someone having a bad time here. Okay. Everybody who's here is loving it, having a fantastic time. It's great fun. It's a great cause. Like,
right.
And, you really, and that's saying a lot because there's quite a few people here,
Yeah.
And, everybody's on board. Everybody's like down for what we're doing, and
Yep.
I think that's just a fantastic thing to have. You know?
Yeah. I had another comment today. I know you're trying to wrap this up. I had another comment today from somebody that came and they didn't participate, but they just came out to kind of observe because they had the time, and they're like, you know what, like, especially for folks that maybe are not outdoorsmen or sportsmen or are comfortable around shotguns and all that stuff, right? There's a whole mystique of that stuff, and that's a thing, and I get that. But I always enjoy people coming out that really have zero concept, zero visual on what sporting clays is, and they come out here and they see this for the first time. They're like, I get this. Like, I totally get it. And you just see it like, I get why this is fun. I get why people want to do this. I get why this event is so popular. And that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. You're just basically filling in blanks in people's head and be like, I don't know if I'd like something like that. And next thing you know, your wife's buying a 20 gauge shotgun and she's out here doing it. So that's super cool.
Yeah.
That's super cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, we should probably help these folks.
No, they're not done yet, Tom. I don't know if you're looking in the camera, but there's still a good amount of chairs to put away here.
Those chairs look heavy.
So let's go back to Saturday Night Live.
Thank you, everybody,
Cheers.
for joining us on this episode of the 312 Podcast. Next week, after this podcast drops, we will have the video for this Clades for Cancer. So tune in for that to get a look at what this year's event looked like from the ground level and from the air, too. So we got some drone stuff.
Nice.
But thank you for joining us. Make sure to subscribe. If you are listening to us on Apple Podcasts, rate us 5 stars. Leave a glowing review. It's much appreciated. And we will see you both at the next Clays and in the next episode. All right. Thanks, everybody. Be safe out there. I guess we got to go help clean up now.
Yeah, we should do that.
All right.